Like electricity, artificial intelligence is expected to transform every business and every part of our lives. AI could revolutionize medicine and manufacturing, finance and farming, logistics and leisure. It could solve complex problems like climate change and cybersecurity. And in the process, it's estimated that artificial intelligence will add $15 trillion to the global economy by 2030. AI allows machines to imitate human intelligence by filtering vast amounts of data to find patterns and connections. You're using AI when an app redirects you around a traffic jam, or locates the closest coffee shop, or tags a photo, or translates a foreign phrase. In the process, you are also enabling AI. When you shop, search, or share, you are creating some of the data which will be used to refine its calculations and more accurately predict your behavior and preferences. And these are early days. With a boom in processing power and an explosion of available data, AI will make major leaps in the years ahead, giving computers the ability to learn from experience and potentially make decisions without human intervention. These machines will empower us. Some worry they could also endanger us. There are ethical questions. Are the data sets used to create AI biased against women and minorities? Should you have more power to control what data is collected about you, how it's used, and how long it is retained? There are economic questions. Will everyone share the benefits of these new technologies? And what will happen to workers whose jobs become obsolete? And there is an existential question. Will the machines outsmart us? Please welcome Terry Hickey, Tina Moen, Carolyn Herzog, and session moderator Kathy Kobe.
Good morning. So artificial intelligence, I think it's a great topic to start our conference today because it is one that is going to require some open minds. As you saw in the video, AI is creating a lot of buzz. We're told it's going to have a huge impact on our lives one way or another. So we're going to have a great discussion today with our expert panel who is going to help us sort out fact from fiction and as well have us dig down into some of the opportunities and some of the potential risks. But before we get into that conversation, let's take a look at the responses you provided in the polling question we asked before the session. Does artificial intelligence excite you or worry you? And this is what you told us. Waiting to see what you told us?
Clearly we're divided.
Yeah, clearly it was like even. There we go.
There we go.
So it was great. I think there's a lot of excitement about AI. I was expecting a bit more of an even split because I do think that there are a lot of people there that have some concerns about AI and really don't know a lot about it. But it's great to see so much excitement in the room around AI because I think there are a lot of great opportunities. So why don't we jump into our session. Now we have a third panelist who's supposed to be joining us on Zoom. So just wondering if we're going to get Caroline to join us. There we go. Hi, Caroline.
Hello.
How are you doing? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So Caroline,
Pleasure.
artificial intelligence is perceived as being very futuristic. We saw here in the room that there's a lot of excitement about it though. So how is it going to become part of our everyday life now and in the near future?
So AI is absolutely in our everyday lives. We are using it, sometimes not even thinking about using it every day. I'm a lawyer. I would not pay my outside counsel for doing things with AI that I'm using AI for every day. I use it to call patents in our practice. I use it to do due diligence. I use it on my phone. I'm using it in the computer processing that we use in our company every day. Doctors are using it to enhance the work that they're doing every day. And it's absolutely enhancing our lives every day. It also could potentially be used for harm, and it's something that we should be thinking about. So the audience perception about AI is correct, I think. And it's why at ARM, we're thinking about, and many companies are thinking about that potential for harm. And I think it's why we should be thinking about the ethics of AI, and we should be partnering with regulators to think about that future potential for harm and putting some ethical frameworks around AI so that AI can be used for good to enhance humankind, but also not potentially used for harm.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of opportunities for AI, but we're going to need to have trust in it in order for there to be large adoption. And so, it's going to be really important that some of the early leaders into using AI do it responsibly, because they're going to set the tone of how others are going to perceive and trust in it. So, Terry, let's maybe kind of talk about CIBC. So, how are large financial institutions using the technology today, and what are some of the possible uses that you see in your pipeline going forward?
Sure. So I think there's really 3 or 4 different use cases today, or areas inside financial institutions that are using artificial intelligence. And the first one is in customer service. The second one is in the back office. The third one is in capital markets. And then the fourth one in marketing. So in customer service, we've heard everyone talking about chat bots and these bots that people are interacting with. That's really the first foray that financial institutions, for the most part, are dipping their toe into this kind of technology. From a back office perspective, there are a lot of tasks that are repeatable kinds of things where simple kinds of decisions have to be made, and this technology is enabling them to be able to augment the skills of these resources in the back office and make their jobs a little bit easier. From a capital markets perspective, artificial intelligence is helping traders identify patterns that a human wouldn't be able to do otherwise because of the vast volumes of information that are out there. And then lastly, from a marketing perspective, to be able to comb through all of this data and understand more about who clients are, and then personalize the experiences that those clients would have with a financial institution. People like to feel that they are understood by the institutions that they're working with or they're a client of. And there's nothing worse than when you call into an IVR and it says, press 1 for this, press 2 for that, press 3, 4, 5, and you don't have any of those options. It should understand who you are, and AI can help you with that.
So what you described to me sounds like a lot of use of AI to augment the current jobs of CIBC employees. So when do you think it's going to become more visibly to your customers? Like, when are they going to start to recognize that they're working with AI?
Yeah, I think that right now we're taking small steps as an industry around AI. At home, we use it all the time. Probably half the audience here used some sort of AI to find the hotel in the conference. What we'll start to see is similar kinds of things from financial institutions, where we're going to start giving people insights into their spending habits. I.e., did you know that you spent more on entertainment this month than you did last month? Did you know that you usually write a check for rent at this time of the month, and if you do that, you might go overdrawn. So you'll start to see those kinds of enhancements into the financial services institutions in the very near future, and some of them already have it as well.
I think that's a really good point about AI, is that it's not going to be a big bang approach. It's going to be a lot of uses of AI in a lot of different kind of less impactful, more acceptable areas. And as the technology improves, as we become more comfortable with it, the ethics and the responsible governance is more in place, then we can continue to move into more impactful areas. So Tina, let's maybe hear from you. So we've all heard of IBM Watson and some of these large technologies that are helping to enable artificial intelligence. Gaze into the future for us and give us some specific examples of how it may someday revolutionize healthcare.
Sure. I think the video was so fascinating because it was a talk track for how we think about AI at IBM, with this idea of an evolution. To your point, it's not a big bang tomorrow. It's going to look dramatically different than today. But 5 years from now will look dramatically different, and then 5 years after that. This idea of an evolution in technology isn't a new one. We've all been experiencing that throughout our lives. And so the same will be the case in healthcare with AI. AI, as we have all seen and already sort of know the foundation of it, is large data sets. How do we mine those data sets in a way that helps us make better decisions? A lot of industries can benefit from that, the financial industry certainly. But I think we would all agree that the healthcare industry is ripe for some disruption, not exactly working as well as it could in many parts of the world. So in healthcare, I think we will see it being applied in slow, measured fashion to help clinicians, administrators, citizens, patients understand the breadth of data that represents what goes into making us healthy, kind of decisions we can make for patients, understand that breadth of data to make more intelligent decisions. So we use the phrase augmented intelligence a lot. And it's that idea of how can I use data sets that maybe today as a clinician I don't use in helping to take care of patients. Things like weather data. How does the weather impact our health? Of course, we all think about things like respiratory illnesses and the flu season, things like that. What about blizzards? How does that impact our health? How can we use AI to get as far ahead of that as possible? Not only to stay out of the blizzard, which is a good way to stay healthier, but also to what if I'm a chemotherapy patient and there's a weather system of some sort, blizzard, hurricane, what have you, coming that's going to impact my ability to get to my chemo appointment or my dialysis appointment. Today, I don't think we think a lot about merging that kind of data with health data. The other great example of, I think, something we're already starting to see and will continue to see is the merging of all of the wearables data that many of us collect, how much we exercised today and yesterday and last week and last month, the sorts of things we ate. Lots of people log their food choices. A huge impact on our health, and I think we all know that. But when you go into a clinician's office, we are relying as clinical people on what you remember or what you choose to disclose, which is often not quite the reality of the situation. So if we can start to merge these data sets that we're capturing and sometimes individually benefiting from, but give that access to our care providers, give that access to the folks who are merging that with your more standard medical data and all of the great clinical research that's available to help make the best decision for you as a patient or for a population they may be responsible from. I think that's where we see healthcare trending, and then that'll just continue to expand and grow.
Yeah, because I think you make some really good points, because there is a lot of discussion about the use of AI in diagnosis for more chronic illnesses. Mm-hmm. But if you think about the opportunities from a prevention perspective and just how the technology is being much more decentralized, capable through wearable clothing, the mobile phones, just how that can also help in more developing countries,
right.
Rural areas. We talked about how I'm from Saskatchewan, so where there's areas where there are less accessibility to the clinics and the doctors to be
right.
able to get that access.
Exactly.
So I think it's great. So I think all of us on the panels are already supporters of AI. Yeah. Certainly, we've got a large group here in the group as well. So we recognize that AI can improve aspects of our lives, but there are a lot of people, and we all do know of some concerns. The media is ripe with failures of AI, mm-hmm. and that something that's gone off the rails. But also there's concern about how it's going to impact the workforce. Mm-hmm. I have twin daughters that are 21, and I really struggled in their age bracket on how to talk to them about what they should be thinking about their prospects in the future. With studies showing that over 14% of workers overall will be displaced, but when you look at particular areas, there's even some domain areas where there's going to be even much higher displacements. So we asked you, our audience, again, whether you believe artificial intelligence will eliminate jobs or add jobs. And so let's see again what you said in this poll. So a little bit more even split, but certainly on the more optimistic side in regards to creating jobs. And I think when you look at the different surveys and the forecasts and the predictions that have been made, I think that probably is kind of where everything comes out on. In the short term, I think that there is this recognition that there is going to be the creation of new jobs. There's certainly data scientists that are needed, technicians. There's going to be different jobs that are created because of artificial intelligence. But on the other hand, there are going to be certain more jobs that are maybe more routine, but even some that are knowledge-based. Carolyn brought up earlier about being a lawyer and the use of AI within the that practice. And so I do think that we're going to start to see a need to really be thinking about re-education, reskilling of existing employees. Certainly in order to be able to support artificial intelligence going forward, we can't just rely on new entrants from the STEM area. We need to be educating everyone in all their disciplines. But Terry, I want to kind of get your viewpoint on the polling. So what's your thoughts in regards to whether AI is going to eliminate jobs overall?
I think that we need to separate the reality from the fiction of what AI can do today. AI is very good at individual tasks. So it can, and for the most part, it's really about augmenting people to do their jobs better. Maybe our children's children may have to tackle the question of, will AI be able to do full functioning roles? But that kind of technology does not exist today. So I think that in the text that you were talking about before, we're 14%, and on the poll, people are a little bit more optimistic that it's actually going to create jobs. I believe that in the long term, it will eventually create new jobs for the industry, all across all industries. Today, there's been a 500% increase in Canada, specifically in AI roles. So it's creating new opportunities today. The other thing that people have to understand is that in a population that's aging, for the most part in North America, we have a whole bunch of people that are going to be retiring within the next 5 to 15 years. We're going to need some sort of level of automation to be able to offset that work as well. So I haven't seen any studies that have specifically started to address this or not, but I think that without automation, we might actually be in trouble because we wouldn't be able to do all the work that's required to begin with.
Yeah. And if you think about the promise of the Industrial Revolution was that we'd all work less, and yet we're all working more. So, I think maybe we can kind of take advantage of that as well. So Tina, how are jobs going to be impacted in the healthcare sector? Because a common example that is brought up is how AI can now read some x-rays better than radiologists. Mm-hmm. So would you advise anyone to go into radiology at this point?
Yes, it's a fantastic career. I think it's a similar story. So it's the evolution, as we've mentioned already before. There's jobs that will be changed and evolved, and there are new jobs that will be created. But what we do on a daily basis will evolve. I have an example that I often use, not a healthcare one, actually, a banking one. That when I was a little girl, every Saturday, my dad and I would go for donuts. He would always get cash. To get cash, we drove to a bank, we parked the car, we got out of the car, we went into the building, we stood in a line, we talked to a person. That's not how any of us get cash anymore, but they're still bank tellers. Their job has evolved. We get the cash some other way. So the same thing will happen in healthcare. In radiology, as an example, and there is plenty of fear in lots of industries, but in healthcare as well. Can we use AI to clear the lower level, non-complicated images to improve throughput? There's a lot of places where the backlog of what takes healthcare so long is in that imaging study space. How can we apply technology to help us get efficient, effective, accurate throughput, and then let the human beings focus on those complicated cases, let the human beings focus on the other human beings. You'll hear me say this probably 5 times this morning. Healthcare is a human-centered industry, so let's let technology take care of those things that isn't a human talking to a human, and let the radiologist focus on, this is a complicated case, it's presenting unusual. AI is not always great at that. It's very good at the consistent, and let it sort of clear out, your images look great. And then with something that's a little bit unusual, let's let a human use their imagination and abstraction and all of these capabilities that the human brain does well with. in many places in healthcare, not just in radiology.
I do think, though, that we have to recognize that if we are going to have artificial intelligence that can do a lot more of reading those x-rays, we may need less radiologists, but also the radiologists that we do have are going to have that higher level of cognitive capabilities, because they're going to have to be able to challenge and be an effective challenger to the AI.
Yeah.
And so we're really going to have to expand the analytic skills of every discipline, because anyone using AI in an augmented fashion is really going to have really strong analytics skills.
Go ahead.
I think the thing that we have to keep in mind, I've got this thing that I talk about called the Sully experience. I think that we have got to keep that in mind. We're going to always need radiologists. Captain Sully, if everyone remembers, the United flight that had to land in the Hudson, he was a pilot, but most of these planes, for the most part, fly on their own. He had the skill when it was required to be able to land that plane and save all of those lives.
Yeah.
We're going to need that same kind of override. We can't become so dependent on this technology that we forget how to do the underlying roles, because that will be disastrous.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I've heard that is an exact example that has been said. The problem is that if AI does a lot of the routine stuff, are we going to have people in the future getting that level of expertise? Are they going to be spending the hours in the cockpit to gain that expertise, to have done the scenario planning? So we're going to have to come up with different ways, whether it's through using simulations in order to get that experience. Caroline, I know we haven't heard from you, and I hear you doing a lot of head nodding, so do you want to jump in and talk about jobs?
Well, I think the panelists have covered this superbly. I think one of the things about AI and the future of jobs, and I think you've leaned towards this, is that there are so many needs today that are currently unmet. And if we really believe that AI is going to enhance that human experience, I think you're absolutely right around how do humans get the experience. But if AI can truly meet these needs, then people potentially have more time to think about the future of the caring generation. And if you think about the healthcare opportunities, and you covered this, there's more time for people to care about people. If you think about the legal profession, currently there's an estimation that at least 60% of legal needs are unmet. And currently, legal profession, if I think about my own profession, people are sort of leaning towards, how much do you get paid? In engineering, how much can a coder get paid? If AI is enhancing that human experience, people might have more time to fill that gap between the extreme poverty that we see in some areas and that extreme rich that we see in other areas, and the future of jobs may be more in that middle area to meet those unmet needs. And maybe we're going to see a future of jobs that's more in that caring generation, where humans have more time to spend on humans and caring for other humans. And so we may see different jobs that are not in STEM or STEAM, but more in those caring types of jobs where humans are retrained to care about humans, and AI can enhance that human experience, and we're retraining for those types of jobs that are more on humans caring for humans, and different types of maybe non-technical training again.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing, certainly in healthcare, but certainly encourage all the leaders in this room to think about their own professions and industries, and how do you help your profession start thinking about what does it look like to be an attorney, a clinician, a finance person in 2060.
Yeah.
And what kinds of people do we need to attract into that profession? How's technology going to change what that looks like? How do we all help drive how we get there, as opposed to just wait for it to happen?
And I think it's really thinking about where in those jobs and professions you really add real value, right? Because we spend a lot of our time doing rote, less valuable work.
Indeed.
So Tina, let's jump into another kind of raising concern about artificial intelligence.
Okay.
It isn't always right.
It is not.
It can fail, just as any human can fail. And so, and there's been concerns that when it has been put in place, cancer still goes undetected, hurricanes still happen. So you can kind of dig into, with that, do you think it's crazy right now for us to rely on AI for more material areas like our healthcare, in diagnosing a medical illness?
To rely on it 100%, yes, I do think that's crazy, despite my profession. So I think the hurricane example is such a fascinating one, because healthcare is so similar to weather in that it doesn't always behave. People in our how we respond or present with a particular condition doesn't always behave as expected, just like a hurricane. Sometimes people get better when we didn't expect them to. Sometimes people take a turn for the worse when all the signs turns towards them getting better. So there's a notion in healthcare that it's half science and half art. And that may frighten people who aren't in the healthcare industry, but it's the reality of how the human body works. And so to your point that AI isn't always right, neither are humans. We've been getting it wrong in healthcare for a long time and many other industries, but how do we balance the strengths of the two? So how do we use technology to improve our ability to understand the breadth of what's going on with a patient or population, and then how do we use that in conjunction with our innately human skills, not a small one of which should be, what's the patient think? How do we feel about what should happen with our healthcare? What choices do we want to make for ourselves? No technology can help make that decision. So how do we have that human-human conversation augmented by technology, which just surfaces more insight from often hidden data sets to make the best decision from a diagnosis or treatment or what have you perspective.
So Carolyn, let's take the same question but in a different direction. Would you right now trust an AI to drive your car?
Well, I have a Tesla, and I love it. I think the question is both yes and no. So there's an amazing amount of technology that goes into these cars, and I have a teenage daughter that's just started driving this car as well. And I would absolutely love it, of course, if I didn't have to teach my teenage daughter how to drive a car, right? If the world was in completely AI and cars were self-driving, and I wasn't in a situation to try and anybody's had that experience of, I'm sure there's plenty of people in the audience that are teaching their teenagers how to drive a car, and we would love it if the world was just self-driving and we didn't have to go through that agonizing experience. So I think the answer is both yes and no, because yes, there's enough technology. Clearly, we have self-driving cars, and there's enough AI for these cars to be navigating the roads and to be making these decisions, and probably usually better than most humans are making these decisions. The question is, on the other side of that, do we trust these cars and do we trust these AI, technologies within these cars to make the same moral decisions that a human would? So would a car, and as a ball is bouncing across the street, does the car recognize that there's a physical thing, bouncing across the street and recognize that in time, probably faster, frankly, than most humans would? Yes, it does. Would it actually recognize that there's most likely a child that's going to run after that ball? Maybe, maybe not, right? And so I think the secondary question is, does a self-driving vehicle have the same morality that a human would? And if anybody has done the MIT test around the moral machine, it's a very yucky feeling, for lack of a better word, to try and take that test and say, are we ready for a machine to make the same moral decisions that a human would? And I think that secondary question is no. So yes, there is enough AI in a vehicle to make its own decisions and to self-drive, but can it make the same moral decisions that a human would? If it's my child in the back seat, am I going to let a car make those decisions entirely by itself and trust the rest of the self-driving cars on the street to make those decisions for me? Probably not. But it's the morality and the ethics behind that the world isn't quite ready for, I think.
And I think the question automatically then comes up, if you are going to put in some moral code, whose moral code? Is it a global moral code? Is it a Canadian? Is it your own, personal? And so I think that's a question that is going to be grappled with for a long time.
The other thing on self-driving cars, I actually don't think that self-driving cars in and of themselves are the issue, because they're predictable. Humans are unpredictable. So it's the combination of people driving cars with self-driving cars that's really going to be the issue. So there could be an opportunity where, if you go back 75 to 100 years, we used to have horse lanes and car lanes. Well, maybe we'll end up with people lanes and self-driving lanes until such time that we can understand how these two technologies or these two things are going to work together.
Yeah. You know, the key to artificial intelligence in decision making is a combination of having both good data and good algorithms. And to take the car analogy, it just came out in the last couple of weeks that for the accident that occurred last year where the woman crossing the street with her bike died, it's come to light that the original algorithm wasn't trained to expect walkers outside of a crosswalk. So it wasn't prepared for the predictability of a human jaywalking across the street. So it didn't think of that when it first saw an object in front of it. It didn't automatically think, it thought the probability was lower that it was a human because it wasn't a crosswalk. And so I think we need to be recognizing that we have that predictability. And if we want the advantages of AI, we may have to change some of our own behaviors. And that's where the open minds come in, as the conference is. But let's take it into another direction as well, because I know that a very often topic that comes up with artificial intelligence is bias, and particularly, and it was in the video as well, as to whether or not AI is actually going to perpetuate historical biases, because it is, in a lot of cases, an algorithm that is designed based on patterns of behavior, that it is just making optimal decisions based on what was previously decided. So Carolyn, what is happening and what can be done, you think, about this particular area?
So, I mean, you alluded to this already. It's, you know, good data in, good data out, and bias exists in all of us. That it's intentional, it's unintentional. Sometimes we're intending to predict a certain bias, but we've seen a lot of issues in bias already. There's been cases with you know, very well-known companies in terms of facial recognition bias, and yet we all use facial recognition to access our phones. Some facial recognition is actually working very well. We've seen that people are already using facial recognition to access you know, planes when we're entering into the airport, and that is showing already a 97% success rate. Less than 2% are rejecting that. There's very few data privacy concerns, and yet we're seeing employees raising concerns within their own companies for the discriminatory bias that they're seeing with facial recognition technology. And that's one that already, from an ethical framework perspective, facial recognition is one where we're seeing a lot of fragmentation in the regulation because of the bias that exists with that particular technology, online facial recognition and other types of bias. And it's the kind of thing that we'll see with most D&I programs and companies. It's the kinds of issues that you would see in hiring practices. If you don't have a diverse workforce that is in your engineering workforce, you're naturally going to have bias in the machine. If you're not looking at the purpose for which the technology is being created, then you will naturally have bias within that potential use. Melinda Gates published something recently about a woman that had purchased a gaming for her children, and it was a male and female child, and yet the game had been designed exclusively by adult male technologists, and the game could not be used, which is quite unusual because most mature, I live in Silicon Valley, most mature Silicon Valley gaming companies now have diversity officers exclusively dedicated to looking at how those games are designed. So I think most companies are thinking about the bias in the machine. ARM has actually now published our AI Trust Manifesto, and looking at specifically this issue of bias, we believe that companies should be addressing bias specifically for the purpose for the technology and how it's designed. It's going to be something that is critical for any technology that is developed, and you have to look at the intentional purpose and address bias at the core. It's going to be one of the key principles for any technology that is developed. Absolutely.
I do think that we have to really make sure that we have a good understanding of what the underlying problems are, because it's a very complex issue. Mm-hmm. Because I know that there's this general call, and there was, I think, some regulation just to eliminate bias. But the reality is that AI is designed to make a prediction based on making judgments between differing characteristics. If you remove those differentiating characteristics, you're not going to have a very optimal decision. So it really is going to have to be a very balanced conversation with a lot of different stakeholders, I agree, as to what is discriminatory bias and what is bias that helps you to make optimal outcomes. And to really understand it, because I think that there is also this idea that we need to get the algorithms to be optimized for all subclasses. And maybe that is not the decision to make, because there could be a majority class that gets then unfairly given an unoptimal result. So maybe you need to have 3 or 4 algorithms. And you start streaming different subclasses depending on the training data that you have. So it's going to be a more kind of complex conversation, I think. But I don't know if Terry or Tina, do one of you guys want to jump into the conversation?
Yeah, from a healthcare perspective, the reality of data not accurately representing the whole is not a new concept. So I heard a yeah, amen in the front there. So there's all sorts of clinical studies that are done on people who don't look like many of us in the room for a variety of reasons, whether that be gender or race or what have you, age, weight. So healthcare has been dealing with this, the data not representing my patient or my population for a very long time, and AI is just shining a spotlight on that. So I think the acknowledgement that the data is oftentimes what it is, and then organizations like IBM and others being very transparent about what the data is that helped make this decision is really important. On the end user side, being diligent about making sure you understand what data was used to make this suggestion or recommendation to you from a technology that employs AI, really important. And then again, it comes back to that element of dealing with what you have available. So if my clinical study on this medication was in 50-year-old men who were 75 kilos and only have this one disease state, but all of my patients are all sorts of variations of that. They're 65 and they're 20 and they're 100 kilos or less, what have you. How do I interpret and adjust based on the data that helped make this recommendation in addition to the patient population I have in front of me? So it's a very similar dynamic to what healthcare has been doing for many, many years, while continuing to look for more robust and inclusive data sets.
So I think from a financial services perspective, I think certain types of organizations are held to a different kind of standard. You wouldn't expect your bank or you wouldn't expect your doctor to do certain kinds of things with your information, but you expect that other kinds of social media types of organizations are going to use that kind of information. So one of the things that we've been doing is we've been trying to anonymize or pseudonymize the data that we have around our clients, and then we use this technique called normalization. So we don't actually we actually don't know what the values are of the data points around our clients, because it's not that important. Whether someone has $1,067 in their account or they've got $1,900, we want to know how they compare to each other so that we can make kind of decisions off of that. And those are the things that are going to allow us to be able to protect our clients' information, because as a bank, you never want even one client's data exposed is one too many. So we're building our systems now in such a way that even if it did get even if someone was able to get access to it, whether it was internal or external, they wouldn't be able to reverse engineer who that person was. So these are the kinds of techniques that we're using in financial institutions today in the AI space.
Now, it certainly is well understood that more and better data is going to lead to better artificial intelligence. And no one has more data than China with the high population that they have. And yet there's concerns about their government's stance towards privacy. They certainly have recognized that AI is going to be their top priority, and they have put a lot of investment from education to private-public partnerships. And so there is concern as to whether or not they're going to supersede the Americas and Europe as a leader in artificial intelligence. So just getting a sense in regards to, we have to be thinking about what are the economic and geopolitical implications of this race to the top for AI. So just kind of maybe just open it up to all of you. Who wants to jump in first in regards to tackling that question?
None of us.
So, so I think that. Go ahead.
Well, I think so. Fundamentally, I think for everyone, AI has to be global. It has to be, like the internet, it has to be something that is successful on a global basis. And ultimately, it has to be trusted. And so, yes, China has more relaxed, maybe a gentle way to say, data privacy regulations around how data can be collected. We know that Europe has the gold standard in terms of protecting its consumers and companies privacy. U.S. may be perceived as being less protective in that. I think the California data privacy regulation is moving forward in that, and I think we all have to pay close attention to how we're protecting data. Certainly the financial industries and healthcare are perceived to have done a better job around that. But AI has to be trusted first and foremost in order for it to be successful. And that's why I believe that companies have to work together to create an ethical framework and then work with regulators to regulate around what needs to be regulated, like addressing issues around bias and creating standards around that to ensure that the AI can be successful, looking at that potential future harm and ensuring that, we already have standards around data privacy regulations, but there are other standards that have not yet been established to say what would be an acceptable standard around issues like bias or future of jobs or transparency and other issues that we've talked about today in order for that AI to be trusted. So to win the race on AI and to ensure that the technologies of today and the future are going to be trusted, I think the AI that will ultimately be successful and that will win is the AI that is most trusted. So companies like an IBM that have trusted AI and that will ultimately agree, yes, I will sign up to those future standards, are the ones that are going to be trusted.
So Terry, let's maybe take Canada as an example. So Canada was the first country to have a national AI standard. Considering our smaller size, we're one of the top AI countries in the world still. So what do you think are the opportunities for Canada, and what might be some of the economic and geopolitical opportunities for a country like Canada?
Yeah, so AI, really had its resurgence here in Canada as we all saw. Hinton, LaCoon, and Bengio got the Turing Award earlier this year, which is kind of like the Nobel Prize for AI. They really continued on the AI journey back in the early 2000s when everyone else around the world had effectively given up on it. And they have cultivated a culture here in Canada where we continue to grow data scientists and AI engineers at the Vector Institute, at University of Toronto, at Waterloo, all these different schools. In fact, there's at least 10 different schools now in Canada that are offering either AI or data science undergrads or master's or PhD programs, which is a fantastic opportunity. In fact, we couldn't graduate enough people across all of those different programs in any one year to satisfy the demand that exists in the marketplace today. There's a study from Deloitte, I think, that says that by the end of 2020, the AI marketplace will be worth $78 billion globally, which is an unbelievable amount of money. But in Canada specifically, there are already 650 startups that are embedding artificial intelligence into their products. It's almost impossible nowadays to hear about a new organization or a new product or a new startup that isn't leveraging AI as part of the fundamental core of what it is that they're building. So I think it's going to become more and more of just everything that we see and do moving forward.
So Tina, a lot of the conversation about the China battle is China and the US. So what's your thoughts in regards coming from the US in regards to that?
So in general, so IBM does a lot of work. The I in IBM also stands for international, like it does in this forum. It's a lot of work in China. And I think from a healthcare perspective, what's really happening that's really interesting there is that not only are they doubling down on AI, they're also doubling down on healthcare. So it's going to be a really interesting thing to observe and see how and where they deploy technologies to help drive some of what we've talked about a little bit before earlier, which is health equity. So lots of very rural areas and lots of folks in China that have very little or poor access to healthcare. And so it'll be such a great case study to see how we can capitalize on technology to provide enhanced healthcare access to folks that don't live in a city like Toronto or New York City or Beijing or what have you. So I think that's sort of my personal perspective of what's going on in China, not the expert to talk about the political implications.
And I do think that the academic world of which AI really grew out of is a really great example of the global collaboration that is needed around this technology. We've got, great university partnerships. We've got the private-public partnerships that are happening, and a lot of the technology companies that really are in every country. And so artificial intelligence is one of those technologies that we really need to kind of raise above some of the geopolitical type of tensions in the world.
Agreed.
I don't know if there's going to be a country that wins. I think everyone, to your point, it's going to rise above. I think what's important for everyone here to realize is, regardless of where this AI is embedded, we as consumers or companies are responsible for the algorithms that our organization uses. So if IBM develops something or someone in China develops something and our organization or your organization uses that, you need to be sure about what it's doing. You need to be doing your own testing behind these algorithms. You just can't take it for granted that they went about it the right way. You need to demand that they explain to you, how did you do this? How does it work? What was the training set? All of these kinds of things, because it's your responsibility. At the end of the day, you are the people that organizations and other people are going to come after when things go wrong.
So as we wrap up, because unfortunately 45 minutes has gone really by fast, let me ask each of you to just take a quick minute to give us your final thoughts on how you believe artificial intelligence is going to revolutionize our world and lives. So maybe Terry, start with you.
Sure. I think that it's going to be a slow go. I know that we talk about AI and how it's going to change everything. I think that it's going to be a world that it's going to be very slow to come into our lives. It'll first start in our personal lives with Siri and Alexa and smart ovens and all these kinds of things that we might have at home, and eventually will come into into our work lives, and it will help us do our jobs a little bit easier and better. I don't subscribe to the fact that it will take over our jobs anytime soon. That kind of technology doesn't exist, so the Jetsons are pretty far away from being a reality.
And Tina, your vision for AI?
I love the Jetsons. That was one of my favorites. But so similar. I think it is an evolution, as we've talked about. I also think that this dynamic of generational differences is an important one for us to keep in mind. That I've got a 25 and 21-year-old kids, and their experience with technology today already is very different than mine has been. And so I think how they evolve with the technology will be much less of a struggle than maybe my generation and older. So we have the benefit of learning from the folks coming up behind us who do have a different approach on what they expect from technology, how they dig into understanding how it works, and how can we look sort of backwards to the generation behind us and capitalize on their more comfort level with technology so that we can capitalize on it in our careers today. And then from a health perspective, it's really about understanding your individual health, the health of your family, much more robustly than you do today, than your care team does today, and having that deeper understanding really speak towards, to your point at the beginning, prevention of illness as opposed to treatment. Let's get ahead of these things, and how can we use data to help us do that?
So Caroline, you have the last word. What's your thoughts on AI?
I know, benefit and burden of going third. So I think I get to +2 for what both of the other panelists said. I think AI is really this fifth wave of technology. It is quite revolutionary in terms of how AI probably, with the combination of all the technologies that have preceded it, it is a combination of everything that has preceded it, but it is going to enhance the human experience. But because of these ethical, philosophical debates, and because, as you said, it is, my ethics are not your ethics, are not the ethics of do not meet the ethics of everyone around the globe. We are going to continue to debate how AI is going to be used to enhance this human experience. And people are going to continue to have this 50-50, perception around, do we believe it's going to be good? Do we believe it's going to be bad? And we are going to have to create this ethical framework around, do I believe in partnership with government and in partnership with society, it's going to be used for good. And so I really do believe that it's going to be a partnership. We're not going to allow technology companies to develop AI on our own without some supervision. And so we're going to have to be using that partnership with regulators to create some more framework around how it's going to be used. So I think a lot more debate to become.
Great way to wrap it up, Carolyn.
Thank you.
So on that positive note, and clearly matching the optimism here in the room, let's give a great round of applause for our panelists today.